Alors, bonsoir.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this regular public meeting of Dieppe City Council this 23rd of February. So without further ado, our usual prayer. Give me, God, the serenity to accept the things that I cannot change, the courage to change the things that I can change, and the wisdom to know the difference. So we have quorum. Are there any conflicts of interest tonight? We haven't received anything, so we will continue with the adoption of the agenda. Motion for the adoption of agenda. Councillor Blanc, seconded by Councillor Nolan. On the question, Madame Dallaire. Thank you, Your Worship. It was on the question of 10.2 on the rezoning project of Yvonne, etc. It reflects the resolution that was adopted, but to make sure that it's the original resolution be on record, I think it should be part of the minutes. So it's an addition that I would suggest. Okay, yes, absolutely. It should be added. Thank you. So with this addition, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Carried as presented for the agenda. Next item, presentations, inquiries by council members to Kodiak Regional RCMP. Mr. Beauchesne, good evening. Are there any requests for information from members of council for the superintendent of the RCMP? You are a free man. Have a good evening. And if there are things that come up during the meeting, we will notify you. Thank you. Now, questions by members of the public. Mr. Albert, good evening. I wanted to know, there will be a discussion on the rezoning project on Boulevard Dieppe, Valmont Crescent. Will we have the right to ask questions afterwards? Because obviously now it's difficult to ask questions on elements that haven't been discussed yet. I think you received a copy of the resolution with the 8 conditions that are being suggested in the resolution. Did we share the information with you? Yes, but once again, if there's a discussion with the councillors and also concerning the conditions that are requested, would it be possible to ask questions at that time? Well, normally no, but maybe we can give a copy of the conditions or read them. Are they in the documents that are given to the public? Yes, they're in there. So will each vote be registered? Each member is going to vote yes, going to vote no. Normally, yes, we register the negative votes. Negative votes. Okay, thank you. And now we go to the adoption of the minutes. I think that's what you were referring to, I believe. Yeah, so I guess it was the addition of the initial resolution that should appear in the minutes. So it should be at this point item, the adoption of minutes, not beforehand and not on the adoption of the agenda as such. The addition concerning the rezoning project would be for the minutes. So as the minutes, once the additions have been put in, is there somebody to move the adoption of the minutes? Brito Nolan on the question. Is everybody following us? Yes. Good. No questions? All those in favor signify by saying of the adoption of the minutes of the previous meeting, signify by saying aye. Contrary minded, nay. So the adoption of minutes is accepted as presented. Now, next item. 10.1 Leisure. Mr. Melanson. Thank you, Your Worship. The first subject is financial contribution for the International of the Cerf-Volant Dieppe. We had signed a 2-year agreement. Stipulates the contribution of the municipality annually. So this is to respect the agreement signed and adopted at council. Contribution of $75,000 towards the organization of the International Kite Festival for 2005. That's for you tonight. So for the resolution, Councillor Leblanc. Thank you, Worship. That Council authorize a financial contribution in the amount of $75,000 to l'International du Cerf-Volant à Dieppe Incorporé, Dieppe Kite International Inc. for the 2015 edition, and further authorize that the expenditure be defrayed from account number 127088 3075 l'International du Cerf-Volant à Dieppe Incorporé. So moved by Councillor Leblanc, seconded by Councillor Thibodeau. On the question, Mr. Beliveau. Thank you, Your Worship. Usually, when we receive the request, we also receive or we're given some information on the financial report of the preceding festival. Did the municipality receive that? Mr. Bourque, Your Worship, in the agreement, they have to give us the financial statements on the 31st of March, soon, to give us an indication as to what their situation is. They're figuring on being on deficit by $14,000, approximately, more or less. But the financial statement, we'll get it within a month and a half. Your Worship, I raised the point that before we give some money, we need a financial report before giving out that type of money, just to make sure that something similar, it's something that we should have to be able to understand what's going on, to make sure that we understand the whole file completely. And then it puts us in a proper position for the request for 2015. Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you. Are there any other questions? Mr. Leblanc. Thank you, Your Worship. So, this is a monetary contribution, but there's also a non-monetary contribution for the International of the Kite Festival. Yes, there is also. Okay, thank you. So on the resolution, all those in favor, signify by saying aye. Contrary-minded, nay. It is carried as presented. Thank you. Next item, 10.2, Planning and Development. 10.2.1, Rezoning Project, Dieppe Boulevard, Yvonne Street. So, Your Worship, following the direction of the Council, the 9th of February last, with the revised plan that had been announced on the 21st of January at the PAC meeting, we were suggested to meet the citizens and the developers. We had 2 meetings last week with members of staff, specifically planning person and myself. So we had some very good discussion at those 2 meetings. And we were able to realize that there was an openness of mind among everyone. So that's for the background. Now you have before you a resolution that contains 8 conditions that take into consideration the requests and propositions of the residents, the developers, the promoters that comes out of these 2 meetings, and that basically meets the needs of the objections and the comments that we had received during the public hearing. So this resolution, which will be read by a member of council, will give details of the conditions, terms and conditions established in order to be able to proceed and to emit a permit once all these conditions have been met. Your Worship, I would invite a member to read the resolution of the terms and conditions. So if we could then therefore go to the reading of the resolution. Okay, thank you for the resolution. Then now, is somebody ready to read the resolution? Councillor Cormier. Do, do you read the whole resolution, okay? Be it recommended that Council accept the conditions proposed by Planning and Development staff following the mandate issued by Council at the last Council meeting held on February 9, 2015. Be it also recommended that Council consider requests and proposals from residents and developers resulting from the meeting that was ordered by Council at the Council meeting held on February 9th, 2015. Recommendations from Planning and Development staff. The following conditions are proposed to Council. 1. That for lots or any part of lots affected by the rezoning application, developments be carried out in general conformity with the attached site plan dated January 21, 2015. 2. Provide that, following rezoning, the above-mentioned lots and any development thereon be developed or used in compliance with the following conditions. A. That a detailed landscaping plan illustrating all proposed mitigation measures along the eastern boundary of the property in the proposed bylaw be submitted for Council approval prior to third reading of bylaw Z-8-41. B. That no permit be issued for development on the above-mentioned land unless a traffic impact study is submitted for engineering approval, and that the recommended measures be implemented by the developers subject to the satisfaction of engineering and Council through a development agreement. C. That no permit be issued for development on the above-mentioned land unless a drainage plan and a servicing plan are submitted for engineering approval. D. That Council repeal the resolution entitled Fox Creek Golf Community Subdivision, Unit Number 10, Kedgwick Drive and Reunion Street, adoption of tentative plan, adopted on April 11, 2011. E. That a subdivision plan be submitted for Council approval so that the relocation of Kedgwick Drive, the reconfiguration of Dieppe Boulevard, the relocation of land for public purposes, and the consolidation of the above-mentioned land can be approved subject to a subdivision agreement. F. That the portion of Kedgwick Drive to be reconfigured be constructed at the developer's expense and in compliance with the standards stated in the City of Dieppe's subdivision procedures, standards and guidelines document. G. That the developers of the City of Dieppe agree on a cost-sharing formula for all expenses related to the reconfiguration of public infrastructures on Dieppe Boulevard and for other costs stated in the above-mentioned traffic study with regard to public improvements. H. That development of the land in question be carried out in compliance with municipal bylaws and regulations. 3. That bylaw C-13/2014 relating to the establishment of controlled access within the City of Dieppe be amended. 4. That Building A, in the site plan dated January 21, 2015, and stated in Appendix A, be completed within 2 years of the date on which the proposed bylaw is registered, and that this building include a minimum of 5,389 square meters, 58,000 square feet, in gross floor area. Otherwise, the land will be rezoned as R3, residential medium density zone. 5. That building D in the site plan dated January 21, 2015 and stated in Appendix A be completed within 3 years of the date on which the proposed bylaw is registered, and that this building include a minimum of 929 square meters, 10,000 square feet, in gross floor area. Otherwise, the land will be rezoned as R3, residential medium density zone. 6. That the outside lighting fixtures, A, be located at a distance equivalent to 2 times their height from the eastern boundary of the property, and B, include shielding to prevent the light escaping to adjoining properties or an abutting street, or to direct the light upwards. 7. That a noise study be completed to identify acceptable mitigation measures for any development, including driveways located fewer than 30 meters from the eastern boundary of the property. 8. That no development be permitted from the Reunion Street section onward, with the exception of single-family dwellings. And I congratulate staff, and I move the adoption of these conditions. Moved by Councillor Cormier, seconded by Councillor Nolan. On the question, Madame Dallaire. Thank you, Your Worship. I would like to start by thanking staff for having established all these conditions in such a short delay, and I'd like to thank the citizens and the developer to make sure that this was possible. So I see really our role as a municipal council as to try to ensure, on the one hand, that development of the municipality continue, that we assure a mix of services in different neighborhoods, while ensuring that it is integrated into the neighborhood, all the while mitigating the negative effects. I would like to move an amendment on condition number 7, which is the noise study. I'd like to have it worded in the same way as the study on the traffic, and if I could read what I am moving as an amendment, that no development permit to be permitted on the above mentioned land unless a study is made to identify the measures mitigating conditions for all, including all vehicle accesses situated at 30 meters, minimum of fewer than 30 meters from eastern boundary, and that the height be satisfactory to the planning and council through the agreement. It's just to make sure that we have something that we can follow up as a clause on this. So motion for the amendment of the motion, moved by Councillor Dallaire, seconded by Councillor Thibodeau. Are there any questions on the amendment? Mr. Godet is not on the, your question is not on the amendment. Okay, no. So if there are no questions, all those in favor of the amendment signify by saying aye. Contrary minded, nay. So the amendment is carried by council. Now, come back to the questions on the original motion. Councillor Godet. Yes, I also would like to thank all the parties who got together to discuss. It was something that I had suggested formally at the last meeting, so I'm really happy to see that everybody has had the opportunity, I hope, to express themselves on the subject and on the difficulties of the whole thing. My question is, have all the involved people seen the recommendations as they've been read? Your Worship, we've shared with the residents and the developer the information that you've read tonight. So, in order to be respectful towards the two parties, yes. And must we therefore conclude that what has been read, what is written in the information, that all the parties are in agreement? Well, maybe we could specify that this was done verbally or in person. So citizens were contacted by phone and we talked with the developer. Does everybody agree? Well, I think that the idea, the wish was to not proceed, but there was a compromise, and we believe that these terms and conditions meet the objectives of each party. Because as far as I'm concerned, the question, I believe that there was a big effort was made, and the big getting closer, definitely among all the parties. So if everybody agrees with what is being moved here, I believe that it is an approach that is reasonable. Just to correct, I believe that the difference between the question you asked, basically to find out if the information had been communicated as it was communicated to council in written form, I believe that it was communicated verbally. And now they have the document in their hands. Just so, following your comments, after tonight's vote, therefore, will the parties have another opportunity, another chance to discuss certain points where there would be discussion? Obviously, during the different readings of the bylaw, the three readings that are necessary between them, there would be opportunity for council to make amendments to the conditions. This would be during the reading, but not within additional discussions. So, in other words, there's no other possibility for intervention formally. Not to my knowledge. No, maybe we could get some information from Mr. Frenette. I would just like to answer yes, if I may. Mr. Godet's question, if the information that we have here represents what was discussed during the meetings that we had with the developers and the residents, I'd just like to clarify something, especially at point number one of the conditions when we say that the lots or any part of lots affected by the rezoning application developments be carried out in general conformity with the attached site plan dated January 21, 2015. Following our meetings, there was some clarification where the wish of the residents was not to have a berm necessarily. That's why we added later on in conditions that there's a study on the sound, on the noise. Following that, the report of that study, then we'll have mitigating measures which will be suggested. And this is where council will have the right to look at the recommendations, and I believe that the recommendations were more at the level of a damper zone, maybe trees, maybe sometimes in sectors where there's very little mature vegetation, and also having the possibility, according to the noise study, to have sound barriers along the limit. So it's just to tell you that the general intention of the plan, when it was amended and presented at the 21st of January meeting, it was more specifically at the where the buildings would be situated, but it's information on the site plan, and unfortunately we're not sure of certain dispositions of the bylaw, but also concerning what was moved to mitigate the noise. So that'll have to be part of it and have to be validated during the study. I'd like to thank Mr. Frenette for having managed this regrouping of people and ideas over the last 2 weeks. But am I to understand that your comment means that the next step for the studies would take more than 2 weeks? My tendency would be to believe that yes, but okay, we're going to get the information within 2 weeks, but council has up to the third reading to get some more information. So, Your Worship, on the question of opinions, and in order to make sure that the conditions are acceptable by the citizens, I believe, as I said earlier, important steps were taken. So for me now remains the question of traffic and the connection on Dieppe Boulevard. I believe that for safety's sake and to separate the traffic on Kedgwick, and we have to have the right in, right out. I think we have to consider seriously the shape of the intersection on Kedgwick Street that has to be integrated into Dieppe Boulevard. I believe that it's going to be very important the shape the intersection is going to have. And if I look at the site plan, the drawing, if there is a blockage for any reason at Yvonne Street, the whole lot that, let's say it's Sobeys lot, all of a sudden, let's say it become one, the parking lot just has one entrance and 1.5 exit, and in my opinion, it is absolutely not acceptable if you consider the safety aspect. It's a suggestion that I have mentioned, and I am mentioning it again because I believe that we have to look into it much more seriously. I think that the traffic study will look into it. I think, yeah, it's also a question of speed. Thank you, Mr. Galette. Councillor Thibodeau. Thank you, Your Worship. I have a couple of questions also. I think I just want to especially make sure that the different reports, different studies that are going to be made on noise or on traffic, we have to make sure that we get these reports before voting on the bylaw, or at least before the third reading, because I truly believe that we need these things in order for us to adopt a reasonable plan. I have another point. I'd like to support the suggestion of Mr. Godet concerning traffic. We should have a right in, right out on Kedgwick so that it would avoid all traffic going through Yvonne Street. And it's also a question of study. So I think that the study should involve this or incorporate this. I think that the question of right in, right out is addressed in the conditions as such. The older drawing, maybe, the one that we have. So it will have to be addressed because it's mentioned in one of the conditions. Mr. Frenet, Your Worship, I wanted to add, you saw it in the memo that was presented, what the residents were requesting, which was basically a buffer zone with a 10-foot sound barrier, where the developer was ready to go was 26 meters with walls. I had forgotten to mention it earlier, just to make sure that it's information that will have to be studied within the confines of the study. Councillor Béliveau, thank you, Your Worship. I think that the comments of the residents showed that there was a concern concerning legal insurance, so that the work that's part of the development project, if they're going to be part of a resolution in front of council to hope to make sure that it's going to be respected, just to indicate that usually in all these projects, all the conditions are respected and they all have to be met before the project is given the permit. So that means that the project will not be completed if there are any omissions or if things haven't been approved internally. So I believe that it's possible to do things this way. And lastly, last question, do we have enough in the resolution as it's been reported? Indications or affirmations that things have to be done before the last reading. So I'd like to have some clarification on that.
Sur le même sujet?
Is it on the same subject? If that is the intention of members of council, we'll need two amendments to the resolution at point 2B, item 2B. It'll have to say that that no permit be issued for development of development before the third reading to the change of the municipal plan. And this is something for condition 7. If that's the intention of members of council, then those are the amendments that will have to be brought forth to make sure that your wishes of receiving the reports of the studies before the third reading. And we'll have to also look at the legal process. I think there's a specific limited time during which the amendments to zoning bylaw have to be done. So I'm not too sure of what the details are, but staff can probably give us some clarification. Yes, so 6 months after the first publication of a notice, which would bring us to the month of June. I think the first notice was around beginning or mid-December. So, Mr. Bellevaux, do you move the amendment at item 2B and item 7, that this information be presented to council before the third reading, to make sure that things are not done before the bylaw is passed, that the work is not completed before the bylaw passes. Thank you. Mr. Melanson, clarification that the resolution as was presented with the staff would make sure that all the documents and studies be completed before giving a permit. So the process of the rezoning, and if you ask that if the studies be done within 6 months, so that you're aware of the reports of the study. To clarify what was the intention of the previous resolution and what you are asking. So that will be reflected in the recommendation. So let's move in a motion for amendment. It basically goes, the amendment goes basically against the intent of the resolution. I don't see it that way. I think we've had certain amendments that indicated prior to the third reading. I just want to make sure that we have all the information in order to make a decision at the third reading while being assured that not everything be done before. We need the information before the third reading in order for things not to have any requests for changes after the resolution. And the reason why I'm mentioning this is because of the nature and the size of the project. I think that the point that was raised by Mr. Melanson, saying that we're changing basically the nature of the recommendation as such. So I'm not sure we would, in that case, need a new resolution in order for us to accomplish what you're asking for. You asked for an amendment that's changing the nature and the direction of the motion. Initially, we were mentioning a motion that established certain conditions that should be met before emitting a work permit. Now we're saying that we want the conditions to be met before the third reading, which is something that's totally different from the resolution. Well, in that case, if it's before emitting a work permit, that the project can still be saved, that it's still going to be done the way it was described in the resolution. Well, there's no construction before a work permit is emitted. And if the conditions are met with a text that was added earlier by Madame Dallaer's amendment, I think that it gives us the same type of security that it has to be done before emitting a work permit. Your Worship, is just to make sure that we have in place measures, safeguards, to make sure that we are discussing now will be accomplished, be it before the reading or before emitting a work permit. I think that the resolution mentioned prior to emitting a work permit. Okay, understood. In that case, Your Worship, I think I would feel comfortable to withdraw my amendment. Obviously, the points that I am raising, I think they've been raised enough by counselors among the table for the enlightenment of staff. I think it's clear. Is it clear, Mr. Frenette? So, Your Worship, if we look at condition 2A, we still say that a detailed landscaping plan illustrating all proposed mitigation measures along the eastern boundary by law be submitted for council approval prior to third reading. So automatically the noise study will have to be brought forth before the third reading. So you can amend the resolution to make it even clearer that would be prior to the third reading. So we keep the resolution as is. Mr. Godet, I was going to talk about the barrier, but if Mr. Frenette made a specific reference to it, I mean, I have no problem if it's the wish of the residents to go with a wall rather than a berm, taller or better developed, once again, if it's their wish. But I would like to make sure of the quality of the wall, because I've seen some elsewhere from the same purchaser that I would never would like to see installed in Dieppe. So, Your Worship, I would like the director, Mr. Frenette, to make sure of the quality that we agree on. Your Worship, the answer to Councillor Godet, the recommendation of the type of materials, the type of war will be brought to you before the third reading. The type of wall, right now we don't know them. That's correct. Okay, thank you. There you have it. On the resolution that was amended and then submitted and then seconded, ready for the vote? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Contrary-minded, nay. The resolution is adopted unanimously. Next item on the agenda, 10.2.1, Mr. Melanson. So in a rezoning project, the Roman Catholic Archbishop of Moncton subdivision, an additional condition on Central Street, so we are repealing the resolution November 10, 2014, to make sure that the conditions are within one format. So it's a question of cleaning up. You're going to be reading the, so tonight it'll be self-explanatory. Thank you. So, for the resolution, Mr. Thibodeau. Thank you, Your Worship. That the resolution adopted November 10, 2014, entitled Acceptance UPC Recommendation Rezoning Application Roman Catholic Archbishop of Moncton be repealed and replaced with the following. That Council accept the Planning Advisory Committee's recommendation dated October 15, 2014 to amend the future land use map, municipal development plan, and the zoning map, zoning bylaw, relating to portions of the properties identified under PIDs 00796177 and 008-20878 and situated on Central Street in order to permit residential development. That Council accept that the application be subject to Article 39 of the Community Planning Act and to the following conditions. 1. That a subdivision plan to create Lot 15-2 be registered with the Registry Office before the bylaw's third reading. That no row house dwellings having a driveway onto Central Street be authorized. That the development of multiple unit housing be prohibited at less than 30 meters of the northern limit of the property identified under PID 007 96177 and the southern limit of the property identified under PID 008-20878. 4. That all other developments comply with the provisions of the zoning bylaw in effect, and that the Council proceed with a reading in its entirety and the third reading of bylaws Z624 and Z838. So moved, Your Worship. Moved by Councillor Thibodeau, seconded by Councillor Cormier. On the question, Mr. Beliveau. Thank you, Your Worship. At our page 27, I think it's 28, it's the first of two questions referring to the last paragraph during the regular meeting of the 10th of November 2014. Councillor Beliveau was asking, do we have a new member of council? I'd like to bring this to the attention of those who will finalize the document. Also at the end, the maps that are presented to us, do they represent exactly the lands at issue? Page 35, it's the entirety, the totality of the lands. Will the zoning change for the whole piece of land, and the land use also, will that change? Mr. Fernet. Just to answer Mr. Bellevau's question, as you know, at the last meeting, the development plan, subdivision plan, was presented. It was based on the land in question with the areas. One of the conditions was that the subdivision plan that you voted in was registered with the registry office before the third reading. It's 18th of February last that it was registered, so it's a section of the plan. It's the same plan that you approved at the last meeting of council. Well, it's not as clear on the images that we have. So we're saying that we have to go back to the last time we studied it to make sure that it's the last plan. Yeah, it's just a portion. Okay, Good. Thank you. Councillor Godet. On the same topic, it's the part next to Central Street that we tried to shade out on page 36. I don't find the page 36. It's closer to Central. Okay, so Your Worship, I have the same problem as with the previous resolution. The meeting at which this resolution was passed, I understand that we improved the path looking at the community land, but I think that this subdivision is too big. So it should have a land for community. So we should accept more community land rather than money. Also, if there's a community land, I mean, that would be close by or that would be acceptable. We don't see it on the plan that we were given. Thank you for your observations. Councillor Dallaire. Councillor Gadet's comment makes me up. You mean land for public purposes? Because community land, does that mean something else? Or is it land for public purposes? For me, a community land is, yes, it's a lands for public purposes. So in this case, it would be a neighborhood land. So it'd be a piece of land that's owned by the municipality. It's a neighborhood land. Thank you, Councillor Beliveau. I think that what we're discussing was addressed at the last meeting. I think that Councillor Godet and I are in agreement. We accepted monies in lieu rather than designating a zone specifically. So we had our opportunity to get our ideas across. That didn't work, so it's regrettable, but it's the will of council. I think will expressed by council and by staff is that there be different park spaces, different green spaces within a radius that was not too far away. We're talking about the next or the following intersection at the corner of Tranquille Street and Central Street. Another question, Mr. Yeah, well, my grievance is that they're not shown on the map. And if we come back to the neighborhood or community land on the other side of Central, it's not logical for children to have to cross Central Street, period. And I believe that the distance and the amount of people who are going to be in that area, there should be a community piece of land. Thank you. Councillor Nolan, thank you, Your Worship. I just want to say if it's youth they're going to be crossing the street, then the parents would be crossing the street. If they're of a certain age, younger age, I think parents should be with them anyway. So it's not a question of crossing the street alone. Thank you. Councillor Leblanc, thank you, Your Worship. I think that what Councillor Godet is mentioning is not part of the resolution. At the last meeting, we already received cash in lieu, so we can't come back to what was already adopted at the previous meeting, even with the subdivision plan, because the land doesn't belong to us. Thank you, Councillor Leblanc. Mr. Bellevaux, I'm sure also that all members of council are aware that there's a sidewalk and a path on that in that region of Central, and that we've had also a sidewalk at the corner of Central and Tranquille, Joseph. And I believe that gives the opportunity to cross the street safely, and also to have the youth walk into the playing zone. So I think, Your Worship, that is it. So thank you. So if there are no other questions, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Contrary minded, nay. One no. Councillor Godet registered. And the resolution is carried by the majority of council. Next item, municipal bylaws, Z624, reading Central Street in its entirety. Mr. Leblanc. Thank you, Your Worship. Bylaw number Z-6-24, a bylaw to amend the City of Dieppe Municipal Plan bylaw. The Council of the City of Dieppe duly assembled and acts as follows. A bylaw to adopt the City of Dieppe Municipal Plan, being bylaw number Z-6, enacted on the 14th day of April 2008 and filed in the Westmoreland County Registry Office as number 254-67813 on the 25th day of April 2008, is hereby amended as follows. Schedule A-1, dated January 31, 2008, entitled City of Dieppe Generalized Future Land Use Map, whenever it is mentioned in the text of the municipal plan, is amended by the map hereto attached as Schedule A-1-22. So moved for the second reading in its entirety. Moved by Councillor Leblanc, seconded by Councillor Béliveau. On the question, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Contrary minded, nay. Carried as presented. Next item, third reading of the same bylaw Z624. Third reading by title only. Once again, Mr. Leblanc. Thank you, Your Worship. Bylaw number Z-624, a bylaw to amend the City of Dieppe Municipal Plan bylaw. So moved, third reading by reading only. Moved by Councillor Leblanc, seconded by Councillor Béliveau, third and last reading. Any questions? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Contrary minded, nay. And the bylaw Z624 is carried. Now we go to Z838 on zoning, Central Street. Reading in its entirety. Mr. Brito, if you've got the voice. Your Worship. Bylaw number Z-8-38, a bylaw to amend the City of Dieppe zoning bylaw. City of the Municipality of Dieppe duly assembled and acts as follows. A bylaw to adopt the City of Dieppe zoning bylaw, being bylaw number Z-8, enacted on the 14th day of April 2008 and filed in the Westmoreland County Registry Office as number 254-67771 on April 25th, 2008, is hereby amended as follows. Schedule A, dated January 31st, 2008, entitled Zoning Map, whenever it is mentioned in the text of the zoning bylaw, is amended by the map hereto attached as Schedule A-31. So moved, Your Worship, in its entirety. Moved by Councillor Brito, seconded by Councillor Dallaire. On the question, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Contrary minded, nay. The bylaw is the reading in its entirety. Now we have to go to the third reading by title only. Mr. Brito. Bylaw number Z-8-38, a bylaw to amend the City of Dieppe zoning bylaw. So moved, Your Worship, in third and final reading by title. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Contrary minded, nay. So bylaw Z-8-38 for Central Street is carried in third and last reading. Item number 12, notice of motion. No notices of motion. Now we go with the inquiries and announcement by members of council, starting with whose turn is it? On my left, Mr. Beliveau. No inquiries, no announcements, Your Worship. Have a good evening. Same to you, Councillor Thibodeau. Thank you, Your Worship. Same thing for me. Have a good evening. Mr. Councillor Cormier, I'm going to follow everybody else's example. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Cormier. Mr. Godet, I guess you're expecting differently from me. Yes, obviously. You would be otherwise disappointed. Yes, I would be. And many others in the community for sure, because I am told people like to get news. So I'd like to start by congratulating the walking club celebrating its 25th anniversary. Thank you to Champlain Place for welcoming us, and congratulations to all those who use that. I would also say, before forgetting it, like last time, I would like to mention that following my intervention at the last meeting to salute the 69th anniversary of the name of the village of Dieppe, accepted as incorporated in the province on 8th February 1946, the mayor of Dieppe in France sent a congratulatory note. Population from Dieppe profoundly touched. Salutations to your village soldiers whom they remember. We thank you from the bottom of our hearts. Pierre Biez, mayor of Dieppe in Normandy. So I thought it would be interesting to see that I'm talking about 1946. Oh, sorry. It is a message that is dated right after the provincial incorporation in 1946. I was at the AGM of the book fair, and it thanks the council for its support. And they will be honoring this project for many years. There were also anniversaries of both flags, New Brunswick and Canada. Not too long ago, I was present at the presentation on the conception or the of the flag, and it was a presentation by Mr. Pichette. It was very interesting. At l'Escaouette, the 41st anniversary of the theater arts. It was also a very interesting play. Thank you for the information. The International Students' Evening at University of Moncton was a success. Maybe not as many people as usual, but still a lot of colors. Musical youth. I think, is that what we heard? Yes, music youth. An excellent concert, and people still thank us for the food that incites people to stick around afterwards and talk and congratulate the musicians. And I am transmitting the message that I've been asked to transmit. Thank you for this thought. You have 30 seconds left. It's also the month of Black culture. I was present at the round table. It's something that we should not forget to get some information on. And I had the privilege of participating in the study survey of the New Brunswick Community College on the police services in the region, and I thank them for the invitation. It was a very interesting experience. Thank you, Mr. Godet. Madame de Leon. No announcements tonight, Your Worship. Councillor Nolan. Thank you, Your Worship. Just to add to one of Godet's point that it'll be 50 years tomorrow that the Premier Luigi Rocha proclaimed the adoption of the new New Brunswick flag. Thank you, Councillor Brideau. Thank you. No message, nothing. Mr. Godet said everything. That's it. So. Mr. Leblanc. No announcements tonight. Good evening. Good evening to everyone. I'd just like to mention the presence in the room of a class of University of Moncton in public administration with their professor, Master André Daigle. So welcome to all of you. I hope we didn't put you to sleep too much with our procedures and long speeches, and I wish everyone a good evening. Good night.